Drafting risky players can win or lose your Dynasty League. And today, Jeff Bell and we are going to discuss the riskiest players going in the top 3 rounds of Dynasty rookie drafts right now. Just yesterday, we came out with version 2 of our rookie guide, and we all have our individual rankings in there. But what we do is we put them together into a consensus that makes it nice and easy for you to follow. And what I did before recording the show is looked at the biggest deviation among our group of rakers to see who is high on some players and lower on other players. And what we did is come up with a list of the riskiest players. And Jeff, atop that list isn't a big surprise. Bhayshul Tuten was a guy who didn't really get a lot of buzz prior to the combine and then absolutely lit it up out there. And looking between the rankings from me, you, Alfredo Brown, and Mike Kashuba, we have him some places as high as a round 2 pick. In others, we've got him outside of the top 6 rounds. So talk to me a little bit about Bhayshul Tuten. Why is it that you think he deserves to be a round 2 pick?
When you go through and rank these running backs, I think that there are 5 that stand out pretty clearly at the top of the class. And then you get to running back 6. You kind of look at running back 6 to about running back 27 or so. And I think that it's a very big cluster that you're just looking for reasons to differentiate players. And what Tuten did at the combine, that was a differentiation performance. To go out there and basically he ran as fast as Devin A. Chan, weighing 20 pounds heavier than Devin A. Chan. And we see how that speed translates. The way that he performed, and I think that there's some things that when you get into the tape, there's certainly reasons to be concerned about some of his lateral agility, those types of things. But that home run speed is going to attract the team to take him higher than what you would expect. And so that's why I moved him up my board quite a bit. Running back's so hard pre-draft because it is so landing spot dependent. And we've seen the last couple of years, some guys that we really liked pre-draft, of a guy like Trey Benson with the Cardinals, or Zach Charbonnet with Seattle, or players that they could have been locked in to the first round of your dynasty rookie drafts had they landed in good spots. Instead, they landed as backups and they just lost a lot of value off that. So you're already throwing darts on where these running backs are going to end up. We talk about a big wide tier. That's one of the other things about the depth of this class that people have talked about. That wide tier is I think it's going to push players down the board when it comes to draft capital and maybe push some guys out of the draft. So that's where I'm looking for something with Tuten, that high level speed, some reason why he should stand out among that group.
Yeah, totally valid. And I am the low guy on Tuten. I am dragging his ranking down in our rookie guide, so I apologize to anybody. But if he does get, reasonable draft capital and a good landing spot, I could easily move him up. I do have some of the concerns about the lateral quickness, like you talked about. He doesn't have the best vision. If he's able to see green ahead of him, nobody's catching him, but you often aren't afforded that ability in the NFL. That being said, if he goes to San Francisco or Miami, these wide zone schemes that are going to get guys out in space and then let them turn the jets on, that would be a match made in heaven, and I could move Tuten up quite a bit from there. Next guy we want to talk about, though, we talked about last week on our tight end show. Harold Fannin is a guy that I am still a little bit warmer on than the rest of our rankers here, and we're all kind of all over the place here. We've got him ranked at 20th overall in Superflex leagues, 24th, 36th, and 45th. You're kind of in the middle here, Jeff. Talk to me about the upside and downside for Harold Fannin.
I mean, the upside is a similar player to really kind of the breakout Jonnu Smith. You're talking about one of these tight ends that can be a primary receiver in the short to intermediate passing game and eat a ton of volume. And so to get that out of the tight end position, that's really what you're looking for. And so Fannin, ideally, the boom case has him with that level of upside. The bust case is we've seen a lot of these tweener type players that just don't really end up working out. And so I think that Fannin, we did the combine episode, and my expectation was that Fannin would perform very well at the combine. He kind of didn't perform very well. He kind of performed, not quite as bad as I think that the reaction warranted, but at the same time,
but below his expectation.
And that has cooled the steam off a little bit. And when you're talking about having concerns about how an NFL team is going to view him, if an NFL team is viewing him as a sub-package player, that could really take his draft stock very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think we change the player comp going into version 2 because of the poor athletic testing, well, poor by his standards, and we knocked him down to Isaiah Likely. And I think that is a great player comp right there. And we saw last year that if a team is willing to operate out of base 12 personnel and line a guy like Harold Fannin up in the slot and pepper him with targets and everything breaks right and he falls into the end zone a bunch, there could be fantasy relevance there. But that's kind of the ceiling outcome right now for Harold Fannin based on the athletic testing we saw at the combine. Now, the next guy I want to go down to is Ollie Gordon, and I expected him to be on this list because he is just a polarizing player. We saw in 2023, this guy looked like he was going to be the best running back in college football. And then in 2024, we didn't see the same level of production. Now, Jeff, I know your take on Ollie Gordon, and I think it's a very good nuanced take. A lot of people just say, well, his vision was exposed. And sure, maybe that was the case, but talk to me a little bit about Ollie Gordon and why you think that perhaps his motivation may have gone down a little bit in 2024.
Well, his team, I think they started something like 0-5. Meanwhile, in 2023, he won the Doak Walker Award. His team, the Oklahoma State, was playing in the Big 12 championship against Texas with a chance to knock Texas out of the playoff. And so they had a very, very strong season in 2023. 2024, horrible team around him. The record did not indicate that. And I think sometimes you see Raheem Sanders is a guy that kind of stands out there where you see these running backs that will explode as freshmen and sophomores, and then they'll have quieter junior years. And you can tell that if he was able to leave for the NFL, he would have left after 2023. And I think that really when you dig into running back, so much of the position needs to be played at that edge. You have to have that edge to be able to play running. It's just a rare position there where wide receiver, maybe you can take a couple plays off here and there and still make some big plays occasionally. Running back, I feel like you have to be pushing to that edge because we see it so often in the NFL when you see these older backs that they lose just that little half step. They go from being solid contributors or high end players to they can't even be on the field. And so I think that's fair to question the motivation. Now, he didn't exactly have the best combine, and so that plays into it. So now you're starting to talk about if motivation was the issue, then that certainly hurts his value in NFL teams' eyes, likely. When he didn't back it up with athletic testing, I mean, he's still size, speed type of a player. He's a massive, massive running back relative to a lot of the other backs in the class. And so it takes one team to fall in love with him and view him in that role, and one team to see him as their potential lead back to catapult every single bit of lost value back. It's just a riskier proposition that that's actually going to happen now at this point.
Yeah, and I think the upside for Ollie Gordon is certainly there, but as you talked about, there are a lot of red flags over the last year that have kind of surfaced now and started to make his profile not as clean as it was a year ago. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is another guy. There's a pretty big deviation among rankers here, and I am the low guy on Elic Ayomanor. Now, I know he had a good combine and answered some questions about his athleticism, but of course, he's got the size-speed combo that we really like in fantasy football. I don't see the quick twitch abilities. He's more of a long strider. I get a little bit worried about his nuance at the position if he's able to win underneath against NFL cornerbacks, and that's why I'm a little bit lower on him. But, Jeff, I see that you are the high guy actually on Ayomanor. So talk to me a little bit. Tell me why I'm wrong, because I feel like looking at my rankings, I'm a little bit too low on Ayomanor, and he's another guy that we have seen in this very complex receiver room. We've seen anywhere from first round grades to day 3 grades on.
I think NFL teams will view him as a starting wide receiver, and we see there's some momentum for him being a first round pick. So you're kind of just dealing in that range where he might go in the first round. He does have, you talk about the size speed combination. It is there, and it tested out pretty well to back that up. And so that's where you see him as a contributor on an NFL team. I think we see his ability to play both outside, inside, to have that size, have that speed, and to be a potential first round pick. So I've got him ranked right there on that fringe of considering maybe a first round pick, or even if it's an early second round pick, landing in an offense that desperately needs that type of player that can absorb some volume. And I mean, if he lands like with New England with Drake May and he becomes the number 1 receiver with New England or something like that, is kind of the boom case at this level. I don't think there's a lot of risk of him falling into being a day 3 pick. And so that's kind of one of the
Somebody's going to see
mitigating.
that size, and that's going to be enough for
Right.
somebody to take the chance, right?
And that's one of the mitigating things when especially when I rank out these kind of mid-tier wide receivers pre-draft of, is there potential to be a day 3 pick and really got to be that kiss of death? And last year I had Troy Franklin very, very high in my ranks last year. I ended up being wrong. And you see when it's wrong, it's because, one, the speed that Franklin showcased didn't translate to the combine, didn't show up, and then the frame wasn't there for Franklin as well. And so all of a sudden, when you have a smaller frame wide receiver that doesn't have ultra high end speed, you're just stuck and he's going to be a day 3 player. Whereas Ayomanor did back up that speed and does have that size frame.
Next guy I want to talk about is a guy that Alfredo Brown and I have discussed a lot on the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. Damien Martinez was a productive guy at Miami, and he has that really big bruising style that we really like to see. I just get a little bit worried with the long speed and some of the quick twitch abilities here. I think that Damien Martinez is a guy who kind of a lot of short yardage, maybe a goal line opportunity, maybe something of that nature, but I don't think he's got the chops to be anything more than the occasional early down and short yardage back. And for me, that's a huge red flag in fantasy football. And that's a profile that I typically try to avoid. I'd rather go for the Woody Markses, the guys who are going to catch passes, at least having that sort of out. So I'm a little bit lower on Damien Martinez. You are kind of middle of the pack here. You don't have a super strong stance on him, but if you had to go in one way or another, do you think that Damien Martinez is a guy who could have a good NFL career, or do you think he is kind of destined to be one of those guys who is just coming in on short yardage?
I think he could absolutely have a good NFL career. I think that it's there to be able to translate into a back that sees good volume in an offense. And one of the things with my ranks, I've seen some questions from people on socials and things like that. They have questions about how there's so much talk about this being such a great running back class, but then when they see rankings, running backs aren't ranked nearly as high as some other positions. And I think that when you're dealing with this cluster that we talked about at the beginning of the show, where these players could end up, I know for me personally, I rank wide receivers that I think are going to be round 1 picks, or tight ends that I think are going to be locked into round 1, or quarterbacks that are up there. And then I kind of have a cluster after those guys that are off the board. I devalue the running backs, especially pre-draft, just because they are so landing spot dependent. And so I think
Yeah.
that Damien Martinez is the type of player. He's certainly landing spot dependent, as almost every single running back is, but he is the type of player that could land into a spot that says we do see him as maybe like a Brian Robinson type of a player that can handle a little bit more volume.
And I think that's a perfect example of a trajectory for Damien Martinez that could make him more valuable, because Brian Robinson came in with a very similar profile. And then once he got into the NFL, all of a sudden he starts catching passes and he's a 3-down back. It took the gleam off a little bit last year when Austin Eckler joined and capped some of that pass catching upside. But we saw it 2 years ago where he was operating like a true 3-down back. Now we got a couple more guys to talk about here, and DJ Giddens is one that jumps out to me, and this one has the biggest disparity between your ranking and my ranking. I get a little bit concerned with DJ Giddens because he is an athlete. Of course, he can run really, really fast in a straight line, but I get a little bit concerned when I start looking at some of his lateral abilities, the contact balance, the play strength. Those are big red flags for me. However, I see that you are still higher on DJ Giddens, and I think you'll probably say a lot of the same things about DJ Giddens that you said about Damien Martinez, that this is landing spot dependent, and it's kind of tough right now ranking these guys. But talk to me about why you're a little bit warmer on DJ Giddens, Jeff.
Well, and it's a little bit more of the Bhayshul Tuten argument, where
Yeah.
you're looking at Giddens testing out as a high end athlete, and that's all it takes is somebody views him as a high end athlete and takes him on that day 2 or that early round 4 type of a thing, just because they're betting on traits. And oftentimes in my early ranks, I will defer to athletic testing and traits, because we see, especially, there are multiple organizations like the Seattle Seahawks or the Cleveland Browns that will kind of defer to those players that are those spark athletes, that especially younger players that do fall into that, relative to maybe some of these older quote unquote producer guys, but these 5th and 6th year players that kind of had the game figured out and were able to put up some good numbers, but they didn't test out as a high end player. It's more often than not, it's still the planet theory when it comes to the NFL draft. And it's still, you're going to take these guys that move like rare specimens, that there are not very many players in this class or in the league that move in the way that they move. You'll take the chance on you can teach them the game relative to taking a player that is maybe limited on the athletic side, that maybe does understand the fundamentals a little bit better, and risking it that can still translate, that when he's playing against better athletes, that still does translate, because that's just always the bet that you're going to go into. And some people would push back hard against that stance. I think more often than not, what we're trying to do pre-draft is we're trying to project draft capital when it comes to these rankings. And Giddens is a player that I think tested well enough that he's going to catch pretty good draft capital.
And he's got the size as well. I mean, this isn't like an undersized speedster. This guy does have the prototypical NFL size and check the athleticism boxes as well. We'll just hope that, the play strength that I didn't see a ton on his Kansas State film, hopefully that can improve as he fills out his frame a little bit and becomes an NFL running back. Two guys left to talk about. And Jeff, I feel like a lot of the guys that we've been talking about, I've been asking you to kind of back up why you're so high on these players. And I guess now it's my turn to talk about Terrance Ferguson. This is a guy that I love. I've talked about him quite a bit on this show and on the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show with Alfredo Brown. I've got him as my tight end too, and I have said that I expect other guys to get drafted ahead of him, notably Elijah Arroyo and Mason Taylor, and of course Tyler Warren. But I think that when you look at what we want for fantasy football, I mean, this is a guy who ran over 50% of his plays out of the slot last year. He is just a magnet when the ball comes in his direction. But what really excites me is the yards after the catch abilities, averaging 9 yards after the catch per reception last year, was second best among all tight ends. And he did that being one of the primary weapons in an Oregon offense. So I understand that when you start looking at draft capital, some people are saying he's a potential day 3 guy. I think that the athletic testing that he showed out with the combine and the production from Oregon is enough to push him into round 2. And even if some other guys are getting drafted ahead of him, guys who are going to be playing a little bit more inline tight end, I think that Terrance Ferguson and the way that he plays football, being a primary receiver, could be the more valuable option in fantasy. Jeff, tell me why I'm crazy.
I think it's usage, maybe the way that he was used at Oregon, set up kind of that yards after catch, and really I think that's one of the key things that we do look for is yards after the catch for the tight end, but there wasn't a lot downfield to Ferguson. And naturally, when you're catching the ball downfield, especially when you're a tight end catching the ball downfield in traffic, your yards after the catch is going to be lower. A lot of what he was doing was kind of distraction, tunnel screen type things, utilizing, having Evan Stewart, having Tez Johnson, having Trayshawn Holden as wide receivers there, the ability to stretch the field with those players, and then kind of having Ferguson as a change of pace, and kind of we're going to hit him with this tunnel screen to the tight end because we've been manipulating them over the top with our receivers. And so that's where a lot of his work came out of. And I don't know that translates to being the way that like a Travis Kelce gets open, in the ability to actually separate quickly versus getting schemed separation quickly. And so I don't know that that's what I've seen a lot of out of Terrance Ferguson.
Which they did often. They would kind of send him in motion, kind of using him as the primary guy that they wanted to manufacture the touches for. So I can understand how some people do have some hesitancy about how that will translate to the NFL. But we'll just have to wait and see where he goes. I'm really hoping this guy can get the round 2 draft capital that I think he deserves. But we'll see how that works out in just about a month here. Last guy we want to talk about, Jeff, has been one of my biggest risers. You know how some people, you just watch them, and the more you watch them, the more you like them. Tai Felton has been one of those guys for me. And right now, I am second highest among our mini consensus here. You are the highest, but I feel like I need to move him up even higher. So this isn't going to be me and you having any sort of dissenting opinion on Tai Felton. We both like him quite a bit, but you like him even more than me. Talk to me about Tai Felton, because he's a guy that we're just seeing starting to creep up in mock drafts, and a guy that, like I said, the more I watch, the more I like.
Yeah, so I actually did we did a live draft for one of my leagues, an industry league that I'm in, and our friends Corey Spalla, Joey Wright are in that league, and Jagger May is in that league as well. And Jag was very upset with me because I took Tai Felton at the 401, and he said, had you not taken him
Great
at the
deal.
401, he probably would have gone undrafted because a lot of the industry's not on him at this level right now, and you'd be able to get him in the post-draft push. But I'm a big advocate of listen to people smarter than me. Daniel Jeremiah has floated Tai Felton out there as a player that he thinks is pretty locked into day 2. And when you're looking at these wide receivers that the testing is there, the explosion is there, and these are the things that NFL teams want to bet on with these wide receivers that have those traits. When you've got somebody like Daniel Jeremiah with NFL.com saying that he thinks he's going to be a day 2 pick, I'm going to take him a lot higher than the 401 in some leagues.
Yeah, and he, checked the boxes we wanted to see as well. I throw that term around a lot, but there were some questions about his athleticism, and he went out and had himself a very athletic combine. And I think that's kind of the key for Tai Felton. If he has the speed that he's able to consistently get deep against NFL defenses, then they have to guard him completely differently, and that opens up some of the underneath stuff that he can do. He's a very polished runner, a very fluid athlete, and with that threat of the deep ball, then he can become a very versatile receiver who can win at all 3 levels. Now, if we find out that his speed doesn't translate to the NFL, then we could have some risk here and, what his role could potentially be. But the upside for Tai Felton is immense. So glad we got to talk about him a little bit today. Well, that'll do it, Jeff. Just wanted to talk about some of the riskiest players in this year's drafts, guys that maybe you should target or not if you want to be a little bit less averse to the risk here. Either way, we have version 2 of our rookie guide out now. This has combine updates in there. We have new scouting reports as well, new rankings, and of course, we're going to have the consensus from me, Jeff Bell, Mike Kashuba, and Alfredo Brown. But you could also look at all of our individual rankings, whether it be one quarterback, super flex, or positional rankings. And we've got a version 3 coming out after the NFL draft with even more information. We're going to talk about the scheme fits there. We're going to talk about potential depth charts. But for now, version 2 is completely free. I don't know if you're going to find a more comprehensive free rookie guide out there. So you can download that at footballguys.com/rookie guide. Jeff, anything I missed in the rookie guide that you'd like to talk about?
No, I think you nailed that. And Dave, you did an amazing job behind the scenes of pulling together this version 2. You really contributed in every single area. I'd pushed this project forward, and we couldn't have done it without you. Couldn't do the show right without you right now, too. And so we appreciate everything that you're contributing. So thanks, man.
Thank you. It's been a blast, Jeff. We've done hundreds of shows together over the years, but it's fun to have one consistent and on the Football Guys channel. You and I, haven't talked about it on this show before, but both Football Guys subscribers long before we were ever working here and making content. So really just kind of a dream come true. Couldn't be happier to be here doing this with you, the audience, and you, Jeff Bell, a really fun host to get to talk shop with. Well, we will be back next week. I wish I could say when, but Jeff and I were kind of flying by the seat of our pants right here. Sometimes we come out with 2 episodes a week. Sometimes they're Mondays and Wednesdays. Sometimes they're Tuesdays and Thursdays. Either way, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell notification so you can see when we have new episodes come out. Or check us out over on the podcast side. Wherever you listen to your podcast, just search Football Guys Dynasty Show and you'll be able to find this. I want to thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.